The Nexus station was always busy. Thousands of beings from hundreds of different worlds walked through its metal corridors every day. Some came to trade, some came to find work, some came because they had nowhere else to go. The station floated in the empty space between three star systems, and it belonged to no single species. It was a place for everyone. Park Tiho liked it here. He had lived on the station for 2 years now, working as a maintenance engineer. It was not exciting work, but it was honest. He fixed broken pipes. He repaired air systems. He made sure the lights stayed on. The pay was enough for a small apartment and food for himself and his daughter. His daughter was named Yuna. She was 7 years old with big, curious eyes and a smile that could warm any room. Tiho loved her more than anything in the universe. After his wife died 3 years ago, Yuna became his whole world. He had left Earth to escape the memories, to build a new life somewhere far away. The station was not perfect, but it was home now. Today was like any other day. Tiho had finished his morning shift, and he picked up Yuna from the station's school. They walked together to the food court on level 7. It was their favorite place to eat lunch. The food court had restaurants from dozens of different planets. Tiho usually bought noodles from a stall run by an old human woman named Bomi. She made them the way his mother used to make them back on Earth. They found a table near the window. Through the thick glass, they could see the stars stretching out forever. Yuna pressed her nose against the window and pointed at a passing cargo ship. "Appa, where's that ship going?" she asked. "I do not know," Tiho said, setting down their tray of food. "Maybe to Earth, maybe to somewhere we have never heard of. Can we go on a ship like that someday?" "Maybe someday," he said with a smile. "But for now, eat your noodles before they get cold." Yuna laughed and climbed onto her chair. The table had 4 seats, but only 2 were taken. The food court was crowded, but nobody had asked to share their table yet. Tiho did not mind. He enjoyed the quiet moments with his daughter. He was stirring his noodles when a shadow fell across the table. Tiho looked up. A girl was standing there. She was not human. Her skin was a soft lavender color, and her eyes were silver like coins. She had thin arms and a delicate face. She looked young, maybe 11 or 12 years old by human standards. She was holding a small tray with a single bowl of soup on it. But what Tiho noticed most was her leg. She only had one. Her left leg ended just below the knee, and there was nothing there. She was balancing on a simple metal crutch that looked old and worn. The crutch creaked every time she moved. The girl did not look at him directly. She stared at the floor, and her voice was very quiet. "Can I share this table?" she asked. Tiho noticed something strange. The food court was full of empty seats at other tables. There were many places she could sit, but he also noticed something else. At every table she passed, people looked away from her. They moved their bags onto empty chairs. They pretended not to see her. Tiho knew what species she was. She was a Velari. The Velari were a proud people. They believed in physical perfection. They believed that the body was a reflection of the soul. If your body was broken or damaged, it meant your soul was flawed. Disabled Velari were seen as shameful. They were often abandoned by their families and left to survive alone. This girl had been walking through the food court, looking for a place to sit, and every single table had rejected her. Tiho felt something twist in his chest. It was anger, but not at her. It was anger at the universe for being so cruel. He reached over and pulled out the empty chair beside him. "Of course you can," he said. "Please sit down." The girl froze. Her silver eyes went wide, and for a moment she just stared at him. It was as if she did not understand what he was saying. Then, very slowly, she moved forward. She leaned her crutch against the table and lowered herself into the chair. Her hands were shaking. Yuna looked at the girl with open curiosity. She had never seen a Velari up close before. "Hello," Yuna said brightly. "I am Yuna. What is your name?" The girl looked at Yuna, then at Tiho, then back at Yuna. She seemed confused by their kindness. She opened her mouth, closed it, and then spoke in a voice barely louder than a whisper. "I am Lyra." "That is a pretty name," Yuna said. "Do you want some of my noodles? My appa always buys too many." Tiho smiled at his daughter. She was too young to understand prejudice. To her, Lyra was just another kid, just someone who might become a friend. Lyra shook her head quickly. "No, I could not take your food. I have my own." She looked down at her small bowl of soup. It was thin and watery, the cheapest thing on any menu. Tiho noticed how thin she was. Her arms were like sticks. Her cheeks were hollow. She was not just hungry today. She had been hungry for a long time. "The noodles here are really good," Tiho said casually. "Balmy makes them fresh every day. Yuna is right, I always order too much. It would be a waste to throw them away. You would be helping us, really." Lyra looked at him. There was suspicion in her eyes, but also something else. Hope, maybe. Or just confusion at meeting someone who did not look at her with disgust. "Why?" she asked. "Why what? Why are you being nice to me? You do not know me. You owe me nothing." Tiho put down his chopsticks. He thought about his wife. He thought about the day she died and how strangers had helped him care for Yuna in those dark weeks after. He thought about all the small kindnesses that had kept him going when he wanted to give up. "Because everyone deserves kindness," he said simply, "and because you asked politely, that is enough." Lyra stared at him for a long moment. Then something in her face changed. Her shoulders, which had been tense and raised, slowly relaxed. She nodded once and accepted a small portion of noodles from Yuna, who was already scooping them onto a napkin. They ate together in comfortable silence. Yuna talked about her school and her friends and the funny things her teacher said. Lyra listened quietly, sometimes nodding, sometimes almost smiling. Tiho watched them both and felt a warmth in his chest. When lunch was over, Lyra stood up and grabbed her crutch. "Thank you," she said, "for the food and for the seat." "You are welcome any time," Tiho said. "We eat here every day after my morning shift. Same table." Lyra looked surprised. "You want me to come back?" "Of course," Yuna said, grabbing Lyra's hand. "We are friends now." Lyra looked down at their joined hands. Her silver eyes glistened. For a moment she could not speak. "Friends," she repeated, as if testing the word. Then she squeezed Yuna's hand once, gently pulled away, and walked off into the crowd. Her crutch clicked against the metal floor with each step. Tiho watched her go. He did not know her story yet. He did not know where she slept or how she survived, but he knew one thing for certain. He would see her again tomorrow. And if she needed help, he would give it, because that was what humans did. They saw someone in pain and they reached out. It was not complicated. It was not special. It was just the right thing to do. Lyra came back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. At first, she only stayed for lunch. She would appear at their table, ask quietly if she could sit, and eat her small bowl of cheap soup while Yuna chattered away about her day. Tiho always offered her extra food, and slowly, Lyra stopped refusing. After 2 weeks, Tiho realized something. He looked forward to seeing her. Yuna would ask about Lyra every morning, and when they spotted her lavender skin in the crowd, his daughter would wave and shout her name. Lyra always looked surprised, as if she still could not believe someone was happy to see her. Tiho started to learn pieces of her story, not all at once. Lyra did not trust easily, and he did not push. But over many lunches, the truth came out in small fragments. She was 13 years old. She had been born on a Velari colony ship traveling through deep space. Her mother had died giving birth to her. Her father had raised her alone for the first 8 years of her life. He had been a cargo handler, a low-ranking worker on the ship, but he had loved her. Then the accident happened. A cargo container broke loose during a rough landing. It crushed her leg. The ship's doctors could have saved her leg, but advanced treatment cost money. Her father did not have enough, so they cut off her leg below the knee and gave her a cheap metal crutch. After that, everything changed. Among the Velari, physical imperfection was more than just a problem. It was a curse. It meant the universe had judged you and found you unworthy. A disabled child brought shame to the whole family. Lyra's father tried to protect her. He hid her from the community. He worked extra shifts to buy her better food and medicine. But the other Velari on the ship found out. They pressured him. They told him he was poisoning his own soul by caring for a defective child. They said he would never find another wife, never have healthy children, never advance in his career. One day, when Lyra was 10, her father took her to the Nexus station. He told her to wait while he checked something on the docking level. He gave her a small bag of credits and a piece of bread. He never came back. Lyra waited for 3 days before she understood. Her father had abandoned her. Maybe he believed it was better for her. Maybe he could not take the shame anymore. Maybe he had simply stopped loving her. She never found out. For 3 years, Lyra survived on the station alone. She begged for food. She slept in maintenance closets and empty cargo bays. She learned to hide from station security, who would sometimes round up homeless aliens and send them away. She learned which species were kind and which were cruel. She learned that most people looked at her crutch and her missing leg and saw nothing worth helping. Until she met Tiho. When Lyra finished telling her story, Tiho did not say anything for a long moment. Yuna had stopped eating. She was staring at Lyra with wide, sad eyes. "That is so mean," Yuna whispered. "Your Appa should not have left you." "Yuna," Tiho said gently. "No, it is okay," Lyra said. She looked down at her hands. "She is right, it was mean. But I understand why he did it. I am broken. I brought shame to him." Tiho leaned forward. "Lyra, look at me." She raised her silver eyes to meet his. "You are not broken," he said firmly. "You lost your leg in an accident. That is not your fault. It does not mean anything is wrong with your soul or your worth. It just means something bad happened to you. And surviving something bad, living through it, getting up every single day and keeping going, that makes you strong. Not shameful, strong." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. She tried to blink them away, but they spilled down her lavender cheeks. "I do not feel strong," she whispered. "Strong people never do," Tiho said. "They are too busy surviving to notice." Yuna got up from her chair and walked around the table. She wrapped her small arms around Lyra and hugged her tight. Lyra froze, her arms hanging at her sides. Tiho could tell she was not used to being touched with kindness. Then slowly, Lyra hugged back. She buried her face in Yuna's shoulder and cried quietly while the little girl held her. After that day, things changed. Lyra stopped being just a lunch companion. She became something more. Tiho started inviting her back to their apartment after meals. At first, Lyra refused. She said she did not want to be a burden. She said she was fine sleeping in the corridors. Tiho told her that friends were never burdens and that the corridors were cold and dangerous. The first night she stayed, she slept on the couch with a blanket Tiho gave her. She woke up 6 times, checking to make sure the door was still locked, checking to make sure this was real. In the morning, Yuna made her toast with jam and insisted on walking with her to the food court. Days turned into weeks. Lyra stayed more often. She started helping Tiho with small chores, cleaning the apartment and organizing supplies. She helped Yuna with her homework, teaching her things about alien languages and galactic history that Yuna's school did not cover. The apartment, which had always felt a little empty despite Tiho's love for his daughter, began to feel fuller, warmer. One evening, Tiho was sitting in his chair, reading a maintenance report. Yuna had fallen asleep on the floor, a tablet still in her hands. Lyra sat by the window, watching the stars. Her crutch leaned against the wall beside her. "Can I ask you something?" Lyra said. Tiho looked up. "Of course." "Why do humans do this?" "Do what?" Lyra turned to face him. "Take in strangers, feed them, give them a place to sleep. I have met many species on this station. The Velari would never do this. The Kreth only help their own clans. The Mari only care about profit, but humans you just help, even when there is no benefit to you. Why? Tiho thought about the question. It was a good one. I do not know if I can speak for all humans, he said slowly. But for me, it is simple. When I look at you, I do not see a stranger. I see a kid who has had a hard life, a kid who deserves better, and I have a little extra food, a little extra space, a little extra love. If I can share that with someone who needs it, why would I not? But it costs you something. Your time, your resources, your energy. Yes, Tiho agreed. But those things are meant to be spent. What is the point of having anything if you never share it? Lyra was quiet for a long moment. On my world, she said softly, they say that weakness spreads like a disease. If you help the weak, you become weak yourself. You drag yourself down. Tiho smiled. On my world, we say the opposite. We say that helping others makes you stronger, that community is power, that no one can survive alone and no one should have to. Which world is right? Tiho looked at his sleeping daughter. He looked at Lyra, this wounded girl who had come into their lives and somehow made everything brighter. I do not know about right, he said, but I know which world I want to live in, and I know which world I want my daughter to grow up in. A world where we share our tables, where we offer our hands, where we see someone hurting and we try to help. Lyra nodded slowly. She turned back to the window and watched the stars in silence. But Tiho noticed something different about her now. She was sitting up straighter. Her shoulders were back instead of hunched. For the first time since he had met her, she looked like someone who believed she might have a future. Tiho, she said quietly. Yes. Thank you for everything. I do not know how to repay you. Tiho stood up and walked over to her. He put a hand on her shoulder, gentle and warm. You do not owe me anything, he said. But if you really want to pay me back, then someday when you are able, help someone else, someone who needs it. That is how we keep the kindness going. Lyra looked up at him with her silver eyes. Then she nodded, a small but certain movement. I will, she said, I promise. Outside the window, a cargo ship drifted past, its lights blinking in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Lyra's father was living his life, free from shame. But here, in this small apartment on a crowded space station, a new family was being born. And that, Tiho thought, was worth more than anything. 3 months passed. Lyra had stopped sleeping on the couch. Tiho had cleared out the small storage room next to Yuna's bedroom and turned it into a space for her. It was not much, just a bed, a shelf, and a small lamp. But Lyra treated it like a palace. She kept it perfectly clean and organized. Every night before she slept, she would touch the wall and whisper a quiet thank you, as if she still could not believe it was real. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Tiho worked his maintenance shifts. Yuna went to school. Lyra spent her days in the station's public library, reading everything she could find. She was teaching herself engineering, mathematics, galactic law. She told Tiho she wanted to be useful. She wanted to contribute. He told her she already did. The three of them ate together every evening. They talked about their days, their dreams, their worries. Yuna had started calling Lyra her sister. At first, Lyra did not know how to respond. Then one day, she called Yuna her sister back, and Yuna squealed with joy so loud that the neighbors knocked on the wall. Tiho had started the paperwork for adoption. It was complicated. Lyra was not human, and galactic adoption laws were a tangled mess of regulations from 100 different species. But there were provisions for orphan minors, and Tiho was determined. He spent his evenings filling out forms and sending messages to legal advisors. Everything was going well. Too well, perhaps. Tiho should have known that trouble would find them eventually. It arrived on a cold station morning, in the form of a Velari official named Chorus. Tiho was at work when he got the message. His supervisor called him to the main office and told him that station security wanted to speak with him. Something about a custody matter. Tiho's heart dropped into his stomach. He found Chorus waiting in the administrative wing. The Velari was tall and thin, with perfect lavender skin and cold silver eyes. He wore the formal robes of the Velari ascendancy, decorated with symbols of rank and authority. Two large enforcers stood behind him, their arms crossed and their faces blank. Chorus smiled when he saw Tiho. It was not a friendly smile. "You are Park Tiho," Chorus said, "the human who has been harboring the defective child." Tiho forced himself to stay calm. "Her name is Lyra, and I am not harboring her. I am taking care of her." "Caring for damaged goods that belong to the ascendancy," Chorus said smoothly. "She is a Velari citizen. She is our responsibility. She was abandoned on this station 3 years ago. No one from the ascendancy came looking for her. She has been surviving on her own, homeless and hungry, while your people did nothing." Chorus waved a hand dismissively. "Internal matters. What happens to defective children is not your concern, but now that we are aware of her location, we will be taking her back." "Taking her back where? To what?" Chorus's smile grew thinner. "That is not your concern either, but since you ask, she will be placed in a facility for beings like her. A place where she can live out her days without bringing shame to proper Velari society." Tiho felt his hands curl into fists. He had read about those facilities. They were not homes, they were prisons. Warehouses where the Velari hid their unwanted children, out of sight and out of mind. Many who entered never came out. "She is happy here," Tiho said. "She is safe. She is loved. Why would you take her away from that?" Chorus stepped closer. His silver eyes were like ice. "Because she is an embarrassment," he hissed. "A broken child living with aliens being treated as if she has value. Word is spreading through the Velari communities on the station. They are asking questions. If a defective can find happiness and acceptance among humans, what does that say about our traditions? About our beliefs? She must be returned to remind everyone of the natural order." Tiho stared at him in disbelief. "You do not care about her at all. You just want to use her as an example." "I want to preserve our culture," Chorus said. "Humans may embrace weakness. We do not." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of running footsteps. Tiho turned and saw Yuna racing toward him, her small backpack bouncing on her shoulders. Lyra was behind her, moving as fast as her crutch allowed. A station security officer was escorting them. "Appa," Yuna cried, throwing herself into Tiho's arms. Lyra stopped a few meters away. She was staring at Chorus with pure terror in her eyes. Her whole body was trembling. Chorus looked at her, the way someone might look at a stain on their clothing. "There she is," he said. "The defective, come child, it is time to go home." Lyra shook her head frantically. "No, no, please, I do not want to go. Please do not make me go." "What you want is irrelevant. You belong to the ascendancy." Tiho stepped between Chorus and Lyra. Yuna was still clinging to his leg. He put a hand on Lyra's shoulder, pulling her close. "She is not going anywhere with you," Tiho said. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. Chorus raised an eyebrow. "And who will stop me? You are one human. I have the authority of the Velari government behind me. I have enforcers. I have the law on my side." "Do you?" Tiho asked. "This is not Velari space. This is a neutral station, and Lyra has been living here for 3 years. She has residency rights. She has protections under galactic refugee laws." "Refugee laws apply to political refugees," Chorus sneered, "not abandoned defectives." "She was abandoned because of persecution based on her disability. That is political, and she was a minor when it happened. There are special protections for abandoned alien minors on neutral stations." Chorus hesitated for just a moment. Then his smile returned. "You know some laws, impressive for a maintenance worker, but knowing laws and using them are different things. Do you have lawyers? Do you have money? Do you have any idea how long a legal battle with the Velari ascendancy would take? Years, decades. and in the end we have resources you cannot match." Tiho felt his heart pounding, but he did not let it show on his face. "Then I guess we will find out," he said, "because she is not leaving with you today, not tomorrow, not ever. She is my daughter and I will fight for her." The word hung in the air, daughter. Lyra made a small sound behind him. Tiho did not turn around, but he felt her hand grip the back of his jacket, holding on tight. Chorus studied him for a long moment. Then he laughed, a cold and empty sound. "Your daughter," he repeated. "How touching and how foolish. You are a small man from a small species. You do not understand what you are challenging. The Velari ascendancy has existed for 10,000 years. We have crushed civilizations. We have conquered star systems. You think you can stand against us for one broken child?" "Yes," Tiho said simply. Chorus stopped laughing. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or confusion. "I will return," he said finally, "with proper legal authority, and when I do, you will hand over the child or you will face consequences." He turned and walked away. His enforcers followed, their heavy footsteps echoing down the corridor. Tiho let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. He turned and knelt down in front of Lyra. Tears were streaming down her lavender cheeks. "I do not want to go with them," she whispered. "Please, Tiho, please do not let them take me." He wrapped his arms around her and held her tight. Yuna joined the hug, squeezing them both. "I am not going to let anyone take you," Tiho said. "I promise. You are family, and we protect our family." Lyra buried her face in his shoulder and sobbed. She cried like someone who had been holding back tears for years. Tiho held her and stroked her hair and let her cry. Around them the station continued its busy rhythm. Aliens walked past, glancing at them curiously. Some looked sympathetic, most looked away. But a few stopped, a few watched. And among those few something was beginning to stir. A quiet anger, a sense of injustice. Word would spread, stories would be told, and soon Tiho would discover that he was not as alone as Chorus believed. Humanity had always been at its best when it stood together. And this time would be no different. The news traveled fast. Within hours of the confrontation with Chorus, everyone in the human section of the station knew what had happened. Tiho did not spread the story himself. He was too busy comforting Lyra and trying to figure out his next steps, but people talked. The security officer who had escorted Yuna and Lyra told his friends. They told their families. And by evening, Tiho's door was receiving its first visitors. The first to arrive was Sergeant Bomi, the old woman who ran the noodle stall. She was in her 70s, small and wrinkled, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. But her eyes were sharp, and when she spoke, people listened. She had served 30 years in the Earth Defense Force before retiring to run her little restaurant. "I heard what happened," she said, pushing past Tiho into his apartment. "That Velari snake trying to take our girl." "Our girl?" Tiho asked. "Lyra, she eats at my stall every week, always polite, always grateful. That makes her part of my family too." She looked around and spotted Lyra sitting on the couch, Yuna curled up beside her. "How are you holding up, child?" Lyra managed a weak smile. "I am scared, but Tiho says he will not let them take me." "And he is right," Bomi said firmly. "Now listen. I know people. People who know laws, people who know politics, people who know how to fight battles that do not involve fists. We are going to help you." More visitors arrived throughout the evening. Engineers from Tiho's work crew, teachers from Yuna's school, human shopkeepers and traders and workers from all across the station. Some brought food. Some brought offers of money. All brought the same message. "You are not alone. We stand with you." By midnight, Tiho's small apartment was crowded with supporters. Someone had brought a portable screen and set it up on the wall. A woman named Jisoo, who worked as a paralegal for a galactic law firm, was explaining the legal situation. "Chorus was right about one thing," she said. A full legal battle against the Velari ascendancy would be long and expensive. They have endless resources, but there are shortcuts. The Galactic Refugee Protection Accord has specific provisions for abandoned alien miners on neutral stations. If we can prove that Lyra was abandoned, persecuted, and has established residency here, we can file for emergency asylum. How long would that take? Tiho asked. If we do it right, we can have a preliminary hearing within a week, and if the hearing goes well, Lyra gets protected status. That means no one can forcibly remove her from the station without a full trial, and a full trial would require the Velari to prove she is better off with them than with you. They cannot prove that, Bomi snorted. They want to put her in a prison for disabled children. Everyone knows what those places are like. Jisoo nodded. Exactly. If we can get to a hearing, we have a real chance. The question is whether we can gather enough support before Chorus comes back. Support, Tiho asked. What kind of support? Political pressure. The more species we have backing Lyra's asylum claim, the harder it becomes for the Velari to push back. If this looks like one human against the ascendancy, we lose. But if it looks like a coalition of species standing up against persecution, the Velari might back down to avoid a diplomatic incident. The room fell silent. Everyone understood the challenge. Humans were respected on the station, but they were still a relatively small presence. They needed allies. Surprisingly, the first ally came from an unexpected place. A knock on the door at 2 in the morning revealed a Dreth merchant named Vok. The Dreth were reptilian beings, covered in green scales, with deep voices and sharp teeth. They were known for being fierce and proud. They were also known for hatting the Velari. I heard about the child, Vok said without preamble. The Velari abandoned her and now they want her back. This is typical of their kind. They throw away what they do not value, then claim ownership when it suits them. You want to help? Tiho asked. The Dreth remember when the Velari tried to classify our species as primitive, Vok growled. They said we were unfit to join galactic civilization. They tried to block our membership in the Trade Council. We fought them for 50 years. Now they want to take a child from a human who gave her a home. No, I will stand against them, and I will bring others. True to his word, Vok reached out to the Dreth community on the station. They agreed to support Lyra's asylum claim. More importantly, they reached out to other species who had suffered under Velari arrogance. The Omani were next. They were tall, slender beings with 4 arms and yellow skin. A century ago, the Velari had colonized an Omani world and stripped it of resources. The Omani remembered. They wanted to see the Velari humbled. Then came the Silthi, a race of aquatic beings who lived in sealed tanks filled with water. The Velari had once tried to ban them from certain parts of the station, claiming their tanks were unsightly. The Silthi had fought back and won. Now they wanted to remind the Velari that the days of Velari supremacy were over. By the end of the week, Tiho had a coalition of 7 different species supporting Lyra's asylum claim. Jisoo filed the paperwork with the Nexus Station Council. The hearing was scheduled for 3 days later. Chorus returned the day before the hearing. He brought more enforcers this time. 4 of them, large and intimidating, with weapons at their hips. But when he reached Tiho's apartment, he found something unexpected. The corridor was packed with people, humans, Dreth, Omani, Silthi, and more. They stood shoulder to shoulder, blocking the path. Some held signs. Some held tablets displaying messages of support. All of them stood firm. Sergeant Bomi was at the front. She was wearing her old Defense Force jacket, the medals still pinned to the chest. "Can I help you, Chorus?" she asked sweetly. Chorus's face twisted with anger. "This is none of your concern. I am here for the defective child." "Her name is Lyra," Bomi said, "and she has requested asylum under the Galactic Refugee Protection Accord. Her case is being heard tomorrow by the Station Council. Until then, she remains under the protection of this community." Community, Chorus spat. This is not a community. This is a mob of lesser species who do not understand their place. A Dreth voice called out from the crowd. Our place is wherever we choose to stand, and today we stand with Lyra. Chorus looked at the crowd. Dozens of faces stared back at him. Humans, Dreth, Omani, Silthi, others he could not even identify, all of them united by one thing: a refusal to let the Velari have their way. For a long moment no one moved. The tension was thick enough to cut. Chorus's enforcers looked nervous. They were trained to intimidate individuals, not face down an entire coalition. Finally Chorus spoke. His voice was cold. You think this changes anything? You think one hearing will stop the ascendancy? We have been playing politics for 10,000 years. We will outlast you. We will outmaneuver you. And in the end, we will get what we want. Maybe, Bomi said calmly. But not today and not here. Now leave. Chorus stared at her with pure hatred. Then he turned and walked away. His enforcers followed, their footsteps echoing down the corridor. The crowd did not cheer. They did not celebrate. They simply stood in silence, watching until the Velari were gone. Then Tiho opened his door. Lyra was standing behind him, her silver eyes wide. They left, she whispered. They actually left. Bomi turned and smiled at her. Of course they did, child. They are bullies, and bullies only have power when people are afraid. We are not afraid. Lyra looked out at the crowd. All these beings, from all these different worlds who had come together for her. Why, she asked, her voice breaking, why would you all do this for me? An Omani woman stepped forward. She had kind eyes and a gentle voice. Because once we were the ones who needed help, she said, and someone helped us. Now it is our turn to help you. That is how the universe should work. Lyra began to cry again, but this time they were different tears, not tears of fear or despair. Tears of hope. The hearing was tomorrow. The battle was not over, but for the first time, Lyra believed they might actually win. And standing in that crowded corridor, surrounded by friends and strangers who had become allies, she understood something important. She was not alone. She had never been alone. She had just needed to find her people. The hearing room was standing room only. Representatives from more than a dozen species had come to witness. Some were supporters, some were simply curious. A few, sitting in the back with cold expressions, were Velari observers sent to report back to the ascendancy. Tiho sat at the front with Lyra on one side and Yuna on the other. Jisoo stood behind them, a stack of documents in her hands. Across the aisle, Chorus sat alone. His enforcers had not been allowed inside. The station council consisted of 5 members, each from a different founding species of the Nexus station. A human, a Dreth, a Silthi, an Omani, and unfortunately a Velari. The Velari counselor was named Rhea. She was older than Chorus, with lines on her lavender face and a distant look in her silver eyes. The human counselor, a man named James, called the hearing to order. We are here to consider the asylum claim of Lyra, a Velari miner who has been residing on this station for 3 years. The claim is filed under Section 12 of the Galactic Refugee Protection Accord, which provides emergency protection for abandoned alien miners who have suffered persecution. Representative Chorus, you may present the ascendancy's position. Chorus stood smoothly. He had the practiced confidence of someone used to getting his way. The Velari ascendancy appreciates the Council's attention to this matter. However, we believe there has been a fundamental misunderstanding. This child was not abandoned. She was temporarily left in the care of station authorities while her father dealt with personal matters. Unfortunately, her father passed away before he could return. The ascendancy only recently learned of her location and has come to bring her home. A murmur went through the crowd. Tiho clenched his fists under the table. That is a lie, Lyra said quietly. My father was alive when he left me. He chose to abandon me because I brought him shame. Chorus smiled thinly. The word of a child against the records of the ascendancy. I am sure the council can determine which carries more weight. James frowned. Do you have documentation showing her father is deceased? Documentation is being prepared. Unfortunately, bureaucratic processes take time. In other words, you do not have proof, the Dreth counselor growled. Chorus's smile flickered. I have the authority of the Velari government. That should be sufficient. It is not, the Sylthi counselor said, their voice bubbling through the water of their tank. This hearing requires evidence, not authority. Jisoo stepped forward. Members of the council, I would like to present the evidence supporting Lyra's asylum claim. She proceeded to lay out the case. Witness statements from beings who had seen Lyra living on the streets for years. Medical records showing malnutrition and untreated injuries. Testimonials from members of the coalition describing Velari treatment of disabled individuals. And finally, a written statement from Lyra herself, describing the day her father left her and the 3 years of hardship that followed. When Jisoo finished, the room was silent. Even some of the Velari observers looked uncomfortable. James turned to Chorus. The evidence strongly suggests that Lyra was abandoned due to cultural persecution based on her disability. Can you refute any of this? Chorus stood again. His confidence was cracking now. The Velari ascendancy does not recognize disability as a basis for persecution. Our treatment of imperfect individuals is an internal cultural matter. It is not the place of this council to judge our traditions. It is the place of this council to protect children, the Omani counselor said firmly. Whatever your traditions may be, a child was left homeless and hungry on our station. We have a responsibility to ensure her safety. Chorus turned to Rhea, the Velari counselor. Counselor Rhea, surely you understand. You are Velari. You know our ways. This defective child does not deserve the protection of this council. The room held its breath. Rhea had been silent throughout the hearing. Now all eyes turned to her. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice soft but clear. I had a brother once. He was born with a curved spine. Our parents tried to hide him, but eventually the community found out. He was taken to one of the facilities Chorus mentioned. I was told he died there a year later. He was 8 years old. Chorus's face went pale. Counselor, this is not relevant. It is entirely relevant, Rhea said. I have spent my whole life following the traditions of our people. But seeing this child today, seeing the community that has risen to protect her, I realize something. Our traditions are not sacred. They are choices, and we can choose differently. She looked at Lyra with something like tenderness in her eyes. I vote to grant asylum. The vote continued. The human counselor voted yes. The Dreth voted yes with visible satisfaction. The Sylthi voted yes. The Omani voted yes. 5 votes for, none against. Asylum is granted, James declared. Lyra is hereby placed under the protection of the Nexus Station. She may not be removed without a full trial, which requires the petitioning party to demonstrate that removal is in her best interests. This hearing is adjourned. The room erupted. The coalition members cheered. Bomi was crying openly, her tough exterior finally crumbling. The Dreth were thumping their tails against the floor in celebration. Chorus stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. He looked at Lyra, then at Tiho, then at the celebrating crowd. This is not over, he said quietly. The ascendancy will appeal. Then we will fight the appeal, Tiho said calmly. And the one after that, and the one after that, however long it takes. Chorus had no response. He turned and walked out of the room alone. 6 months later, the adoption was finalized. It had taken countless forms, endless interviews, and more legal arguments than Tiho could count. But in the end, the paperwork was signed. Lyra was officially his daughter. They celebrated at Bomi's noodle stall, surrounded by friends from across the station. Yuna had made a banner that read "Welcome Home, Sister" with colorful drawings of stars and spaceships. Lyra laughed when she saw it, a real laugh, free and bright. But the best gift came from an unexpected source. A medical team from Earth had heard about Lyra's story. They had been developing new prosthetic technology, and they wanted to help. They designed a custom leg for her, lightweight and elegant, fitted with neural interfaces that let her control it like a natural limb. The day she received it, Tiho helped her stand. She let go of his hand and took a step, then another, then another. She walked across the room without her crutch for the first time in 5 years. Yuna cheered. Tiho wiped his eyes, and Lyra stood in the middle of the room looking down at her new leg, crying tears of pure joy. 1 year later, life had settled into a new normal. Tiho still worked as a maintenance engineer. Yuna was now 8 and had decided she wanted to be a starship captain someday. Lyra was studying at the Station Academy, the first Velari with a disability ever admitted. Their apartment was always full of visitors, friends from the coalition, neighbors who had become family, children from the station who came to play with Yuna and listen to Lyra's stories. One evening, they were eating dinner at their usual table in the food court when a small figure approached. It was a Dreth child, a boy no older than 5. He was thin and dirty with a torn shirt and scared eyes. He was alone. Lyra saw him first. She put down her fork and studied him for a moment. Then she stood up and walked over. "Hello," she said gently. "Are you hungry?" The boy nodded. "Would you like to share our table?" The boy looked at the table. He looked at the smiling human girl and the kind-faced human man. He looked at Lyra, with her lavender skin and her prosthetic leg and her warm silver eyes. He nodded again. Lyra took his hand and led him to the empty chair. Yuna scooted over to make room. Tiho signaled Bomi for another bowl of noodles. Across the food court, beings of many species watched. Some shook their heads, confused by the strange behavior of these humans and their Velari daughter, but others smiled. A few quietly pulled out empty chairs at their own tables, just in case someone needed a place to sit. Lyra looked at her father across the table. He smiled at her, and she smiled back. The universe was vast and cold and often cruel. But here, in this small corner of a busy space station, something warm was growing. It had started with a simple question, asked by a frightened girl to a stranger who chose to be kind. "Can I share this table?" And it had changed everything. Because that was what humans did. They did not conquer the galaxy with weapons or technology. They conquered it one act of kindness at a time, one shared meal, one offered hand, one empty chair waiting for someone who needed it. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything.